ambassadors. My name is Tracy Duncan, and on behalf of the team at Fearless, thank you so much for joining us. While everyone is logging in and getting settled, and before I hand over to our host and CEO, Alex Gerrick, just some general housekeeping and announcements. As always in our webinar, we welcome any questions you may have. Please comment in the Q&A section, and we hope to have time at the end of the session to answer these with our panel. We'll also be recording this webinar, and a link will be sent to all registered attendees in the coming days. So if you're unable to attend this event live and need to duck off early, you still will be able to view the recording at your own convenience. A little bit about Fearless. We're a charity run by volunteers, and we're always grateful to receive donations, no matter how small, to continue the work we do. Our vision is to restore control to people living with post-traumatic stress. Donations can be made via our website, www.fearless.org.au. You can also stay connected with Fearless socially on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. We provide updates on any upcoming webinars and events like our national conversation on these pages, so be sure to follow us. Okay, I think we're now ready to get started. So good afternoon, Alex. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much, Tracy, and welcome everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Alex Gerrick. I'm the CEO of Fearless Outreach. Coming to you, I'd like to say sunny Canberra, but it's anything but. There's like a mini cyclone going through my house at the moment. So if I break off during the course of the webinar, you know what's happened. But welcome everyone again. It's the last of our webinars. Looking forward to talking with four amazing people. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land where I live here in Canberra, the Ngunnawal people, and the elders past, present and emerging. Before we start, I just want to reiterate that we at Fearless are not medical practitioners. We're a group of people who either have suffered from PTSD or have been involved in the management of PTSD. Should anything of our discussion today trigger you in any way, please see a medical practitioner or a mental health specialist as quickly as you can. And also, as I said, we're not mental health specialists. Anything to do with your own personal condition should be taken up with your own medical practitioners. So with that in mind, I'm going to now hand over to our four fantastic latest ambassadors. We've got 6 ambassadors all told in Fearless. RENEE, ANASTASIA, Grant and KERRIE have joined recently. They bring a wealth of experience and talent to Fearless. And what we thought would be appropriate is to get their views, and they've got vast experiences in their own careers in dealing with PTSD. What we thought we might do is to have that chat with them as we enter into the Christmas period, because many of us know it is normally one of the worst periods for mental health for so many different reasons. So we'll introduce the 4 guys, allow them to talk a little bit about themselves, and then we'll talk more generally about some of the things that we might be able to do around the Christmas period to not only improve our mental health, but those of us around us and those friends of ours who we are concerned about. So to get things rolling, I'm going to hand over to my very good friend, KERRIE ATHERTON. And KERRIE, I'm just going to ask you a little bit about your own background and why you've joined Fearless as an ambassador.
Thanks, Alex, and welcome to everyone out there. I first came in contact with Alex when I was invited to present a keynote at the first ever conversation at Caloundra on the Sunshine Coast. And what really struck me when I was at that conference, there was around 150 people, and it was the fact that everybody that was there was wanting to really move forward with their life. I've found a common thread with all the people that were there of not wanting to stay in that victim mentality, but really wanting to move forward and to find a group of positive people that they could seek help and connection with. And that's what I found in the Fearless organisation. And so I was just so thrilled when Alex and the team invited me to be an ambassador. Because it's an organisation that I just so strongly believe in, and something that I think is such a positive thing for people out there that are struggling with PTSD. And the amount of people that have come to me for support for PTSD that I've then been able to refer on to Fearless has been phenomenal. And it's just great to know that there's that Fearless is out there for anyone that's struggling. And I've suffered with PTSD myself, you know. I've had a lot of trauma in my life and suffered a lot of loss in a lot of different situations. And I'm not a first responder. I'm not on the front line. I'm just an everyday person who has struggled through life, and probably a voice for people out there that think that they can't be suffering with PTSD because they don't fall into those other two categories. So really blessed to be on board, and so great to be a part of such a great group of people.
Fantastic. Thanks, KERRIE. And for those who don't know, KERRIE is a published author. She's written 3 books around stories of hope, and they're all about people, everyday people like us who go through life with their own traumas and their own issues, but how they basically move forward with their lives. And that key word, hope, is something that KERRIE does every day, giving people hope for those who are suffering from mental illness or PTSD or for other misfortunes in their life. So well done, KERRIE. Absolutely fantastic to have you with us. Our next our next ambassador is someone, again, a very good friend of mine. We've worked together in the Department of Veterans Affairs for 4 years, and we've remained very close since. And it's been an absolute honour to have RENEE Wilson join our organisation. But I'm going to allow her to promote herself rather than me do it. So over to you, RENEE.
Thanks, Alex, and good afternoon, everybody. I'm not great at self-promotion, so I'll try to avoid that if I can. I'm the spouse of an Afghanistan veteran who was significantly wounded during his service and suffered quite severe injuries. I guess my experience with PTSD has been a combination of the little T traumas that build up over time, and then what really triggered it was that big T trauma. And I guess what attracted me to a role like this is we don't often hear from veterans' families. We don't hear about their stories. We hear about it as a bit of a byline in policy that makes people feel good, or we hear about it through the lens of vicarious trauma, and I really don't like those words, and I don't like them because it makes it sound secondary. And for that person that's suffering it, it's anything but. And, you know, similar to KERRIE, my first interaction with Fearless was at their very first national conference, and it was a privilege to be part of that. And the reason I said yes to be part of that and being part of Fearless is because it's so imperative that we get to hear more stories of people who journey through PTSD, who can come out the other side and who can live with it, because it's not a life sentence. It doesn't have to take your life. It doesn't have to consume your life when you've got, you know how to manage it. You know how to manage the symptoms. And I think that there's a lot of the narrative around, as KERRIE said, about I've got this and I'm now subject to this thing that's part of my life, but you're not. And when you journey through, you can actually regain control, as Tracy mentioned at the start. And I think similar to what KERRIE had mentioned about just being that voice for someone who isn't a veteran, who isn't a first responder. I mean, I know myself, when I was first diagnosed, I sat back and said, I don't deserve PTSD. And I had a real problem with the label. And then that was the biggest barrier to my treatment for a while, because I wasn't a veteran. I felt like I was almost in competition, but just normalizing it. And then subsequently, in the many years that have gone past, learning more and more about trauma and learning more and more about how unresolved trauma can impact us just in every aspect of our lives, and wanting just to help people see that as you're interacting with other people as well as within yourself. Alex.
Fantastic. Thanks, RENEE. And to also add that RENEE is the CEO of War Widows New South Wales, where she's done a fantastic job in representing the interests of war widows. a group in our community who have made so many sacrifices themselves in terms of supporting their spouses. But no, RENEE continues just to do amazing work, and it's an absolute pleasure to have her now involved with Fearless. So thank you, RENEE. The next person I'd like to introduce you to is Grant Edwards. Grant is a former AFP policeman. We're honoured to have Grant involved with Fearless, and I'll let him talk about his recent world record attempt, but it's just been fantastic to have someone with Grant's background and knowledge now representing Fearless. So I'm going to hand over to Grant and let him tell you a little bit about himself.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. That's right. I was 34 years with the AFP, retired in 2019, and have since basically devoted my time to the same as many of the other ambassadors here, to mental health and the journey. My story started about 20 years ago when I was working in child exploitation and the exploitation of women and children in the AFP. But like many, I suffered alone and suffered in silence, making really just a number of excuses as to why I was feeling like I was feeling, but would never once acknowledge that I had a mental health issue. In fact, even when my doctor first told me that he thought I had, a PTSI, I refused to accept that. But I wasn't formally diagnosed until in 2018. So I was everything that represented, I guess, what we all collectively talk about in terms of individuals. I did everything wrong. And, what I want to do now is correct that through my own experiences and share, my lived experience through that process. Like RENEE, I'm a big believer that the canary in the coal mine in regards to this are the family and loved ones. They see it, they experience it first, yet for a long time, or only up until recently, they've never had a voice. So, what RENEE and others are doing in terms of expanding that voice is fantastic, because you're right, it isn't just first responders and military that suffer from this. What attracted me to Fearless? First of all, I love the idea that it's run by volunteers. There's no hidden agenda. There's no egos like, many other entities that put themselves out there to be there for the people and are not. Evidence-based. And in particular, what really drew me to it was the fact that it's society-wide, and to hear the stories of other people that aren't involved in first responder, police, etc., military, and hear how that's impacted them and the issues that they've gone through. And just the statistics that, were mentioned at the very first conference and that are mentioned regularly by Fearless, so the amount of people that are suffering from a post-traumatic stress injury in Australia, and then, times that by the families and the loved ones that are associated, is astounding. What really galvanized me, I guess, was the tipping point, was when I retired from the AFP, I applied to the ADF to join the reserves, and rocketed through all the processes until it come to the medical. And as soon as I uttered the word PTSI, I was immediately rejected without even speaking to a medical practitioner or anyone. It was basically, I put that acronym down, and it was like, thank you very much, but you've failed the application. That bristled me, and that just fed into the narrative, that negative of the stigma, the discrimination, reinforced the stereotypes that depict people with a PTSI or a PTSD as dangerous, unpredictable, incompetent. And this is from a preeminent organisation in Australia who, and I don't mean to offend anybody, but on the surface talks about all they're doing, for mental health and things like that, but completely reject people without even offering them. So that's a very short synopsis, but that's why I'm here today, and that's why I'm with Fearless, and I'm eternally grateful for the opportunity.
Fantastic, Grant, and it's great to have you. Grant's also a recognised strongman, and he attempted a world record a couple of months ago at Government House here in Canberra. It was a fantastic day, raising money for Fearless, but also promoting mental health. It was just a brilliant day, and I think it's people like Grant and the rest of the team here that actually go out there and engage with the community. They are the people that really makes a difference. But your point is really well made around looking beyond just first responders and the military. I think that's something that when I joined Fearless, it was a goal of mine to ensure that people recognise that anyone can get PTSD at any time. It's not just something that we associate with the military and first responders, although having said that, there's obviously a high proportion from those groupings. But I mean, as we found out during COVID, for example, and through the bushfires in southern New South Wales, people from all walks of life suffering from PTSD, and also, unfortunately, those who are suffering domestic violence, sexual assault, a whole range of things. Anyone can become a victim. So we must keep that conversation going and making sure that, as you said, Grant, the stigma is reduced from PTSD, because I think it's still there, unfortunately. And I talk to people regularly from the ADF who are good friends of mine, and they tell me it's still there. So we need to improve that. So thank you, Grant. Finally, I'm going to introduce you to Dr. ANASTASIA HRONIS. I came across ANASTASIA initially when I was looking for speakers for last year's national conversation, and ANASTASIA is a very, very accomplished pianist as well as being a psychologist. And I saw a recital that she gave, that she posted on LinkedIn, and it was so beautiful. I said to myself, I've got to have this person speak at our conference and got to have this person as our ambassador. And she did a fantastic presentation last year for our conference. She does amazing work in her own right, but I'm going to let ANASTASIA talk to you about that. So ANASTASIA, over to you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Alex, and thank you to everyone for having me here. So pleased to be a Fearless ambassador. I wear a little bit of a different hat to some of the other ambassadors here. I don't have my own sort of personal experiences of PTSD and trauma. I'm a clinical psychologist, so I come with a bit of the clinician lens. I work clinically across the mental health spectrum, but particularly with individuals who are experiencing trauma as well as addiction concerns. And I'm also a lecturer and a researcher at the University of Technology, Sydney, where again, much of my research is focused within the space of trauma and also addictions as well. I was really pleased when Alex asked me if I wanted to be an ambassador for Fearless, because I'm a huge supporter of the work and the advocacy that they do. I'm a really big believer in two things: one, stepped care models of treatment, and two, working across sectors. So I think within the mental health care space, traditionally, we haven't really been so great at applying stepped care models of intervention. So traditionally, people have become unwell, they have sought treatment, they've been provided that treatment, and that's really great. And there's a time and a place for that, and it's very much needed. And it's only more recently in the last sort of, I'd say 5 to 10 years, that we've really, that Australia has really realised the need for stepped care models. So being able to act from a preventative perspective, from early intervention, and as well as low intensity treatment. Not everyone who's experiencing a mental health condition of some sort needs the same sort of intervention. And slowly with time, we're becoming a little bit better at understanding that. As well, to add to that, I think working across sectors is really important. And I think it's something that I heard when I heard Alex and the other members of Fearless talk. They talked about this idea of, when I think about what we need to do in order to combat PTSD, it's not just treat PTSD, it's being able to work with particular organizations where we know PTSD is, there's a greater chance of it. So for example, with our first responders, with the military, etc. But as well working across sectors in the sense that we know there's a high crossover between, for example, homelessness and PTSD, or addiction treatment and PTSD treatment. Our First Nations Australians who experience intergenerational trauma, and working with our Indigenous communities. So when I think about where we can do some really sort of beneficial work within the PTSD space and advocacy, it's not just about sort of supporting individuals, but really looking at the holistic picture of where trauma and PTSD fits into society and how we can work from a societal, perhaps public health lens to really try and create some change. So that's what I'm really passionate about. And I'm a huge advocate and supporter of the work that Fearless do, not only in the clinical treatment space, but in research, within advocacy and everything else. So thank you for having me here.
Fantastic. Thanks, Anastasia. I'll get onto that issue about addiction shortly with you, because I think that's very pertinent also over the holiday season as well. But I'll get onto that in a moment. So thank you, everyone. As I said, it's been an absolute pleasure from our perspective to have you all on board. But what I want to do now is talk about the main theme of the webinar, which is around mental health and looking after your mental health over the Christmas break. Because as I said at the beginning of the webinar, it's generally a very bad time for probably the worst time for people who do suffer from PTSD and mental health conditions for a number of reasons. And we'll get onto some of those reasons in a moment. But what I wanted to start to do is just to talk a little bit more detail about that. And I was going to start the conversation by asking you what mental health strategies would you suggest to get through the festive period. However, one of our co-colleagues, Belinda Neal, has already submitted a question along those lines, so great minds think alike. But I'm going to hand that over to you, because we do see, as I said, an uptake of mental health, particularly those who are suffering loss of family, who don't have that support mechanism in place over the Christmas period. So I'd like to hear from you guys about what do you think are some of the strategies that people who do find this time of the year difficult, what they can do to help alleviate some of those issues. So I'm going to open it up to the floor. Whoever wants to jump in first can do so, and we can take the conversation from there. Other than that, I'm going to select someone. Okay,
I'm happy to go, Alex, first.
Yeah.
What I've learned on my own personal journey is that you, as someone who suffers and a family who suffers along with me, we couldn't wait for somebody to try and help. If you sit back and wait because of whatever reason, whether you're disgruntled, you're angry, you know, that you portion blame to other things, you know, you fear the stigma, all the things that we've talked about, you've got to be proactive in yourself. And this is what I've done over the last few years. And what I've tried to focus on are the things that I can control within my own purview. And by virtue of that also relates to my family and my loved ones as well. So I'm very much a big believer in terms of the wellness activities. This time of year usually means, you know, socialization, parties, all those things that will trigger a lot of people, and that people like myself will go to great lengths to find reasons or excuses not to do that. Over the years, what I've tried to do is use this period as a period of reflection. Still enjoy myself within my boundaries, but when I say reflection, now this is all me just talking about what I do, so it's up to others whether they want to take this. But I developed two strategies, and they're well-known strategies. They're not things that I developed personally, but in terms of came up with the idea. But I have two elements that I go by every year. And I have my own 6 pillars of health, and I have a wellness wheel. And I use this time. In the past, I used to always look for, you know, New Year's resolutions. This is great, going into a new year, you know, doing all the things that people want to do in the new year. And as we know, about 90% of those usually you know, people have dropped off them by the year. So I flipped it and used it as a time of reflection, because I've already established this. But I also established this during a period over Christmas, in the downtime when we tend to have a little bit more time. That can also be a trigger when you have too much time to think and space. So I consumed the time in, if you like, being selfish in myself. So when I talk about wellness, I talk about the proactivity of it, because we tend to always be reactive when we get hurt or when something happens. We react to it. We're not proactive. And so instead of trying to fix a problem when it arises, the idea of the wellness is continually working to improve yourself. And it's not about achieving your own ideas of perfection or meeting unattainable benchmark, like I said, in terms of New Year's resolutions. It's more about taking care of the whole yourself and continually expanding your potential. So I won't go into the details, but I'll just give you an idea of how I've broken it up. And everyone that I've spoken to that has done something similar has their own bent on this. So when I talk about the 6 pillars of health, the first and one of the most important one is nutrition and nourishment. And that's hard around this time of year. Movement. And I say movement, I don't say physical activity, I say movement. There's a difference. You know, yeah, I mean, I can do, you know, sports and things like that, but this is about movement. Stress and fatigue management, sleep hygiene, really, really important. Connection and your own purpose and your identity. So I have a narrative under each of those, and I use this time of year to go back and reflect on that. Have I been able to achieve what I set out last year? Do I need to reshape them? What do I need to do into the new year that might give me, you know, something else I need to look at? And then if people haven't heard of it, a wellness wheel, just Google wellness wheel. There's plenty out there to go by. That's a little more broader, and that's the wellness wheel has 7 elements for me. It's spiritual, not the religious spiritual, but the spiritual in the broader sense. Social, environmental, occupational, physical, social, and intellectual wellness. And I just find that really useful, again, around this time of year, to go back and have a look and what I need to adjust and what I need to do. And I talk to my family about it too, because although it's about me, you know, it's like Newton's law, you know, every reaction has an equal and opposite reaction. So I include them in that too. It's not something that is done, it's not a dour process, it's just a general conversation. And that in itself helps to expand that discussion about that it's okay to talk about your mental health, but understanding that sitting behind that simple little term of mental health, there's all these other complexities there that you can either embrace, or if you don't want to. But I just found that really, really useful. And this is a perfect time of year because you've got the space to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. You do have that time to think, and you do have that space, and there are some very pertinent comments there. So thanks, Grant. Kerrie, I'm going to go to you, because you see things in the community every day, and even though Sunshine Coast is it's a very lovely place to live, there are people who walk. You know, I've seen it myself, people who do have issues on the day-to-day basis. And I guess from your perspective, from what you see, what are some of the key things for you leading up to the festive season, particularly given in the Sunshine Coast, where it is a wealthy place in many regards, and you've got people coming in there for holidays and a whole range of different things. What are some of the things that you see?
Well, yeah, lately, and in my work with people with trauma and addictions, I am having a lot of people coming and talking to me about problems with boundaries.
Yeah.
Now, I think when we're thinking about our mental health, there's nobody that's more important than us at that time. And I think, you know, something I really wanted to encourage people with today is don't value yourself enough to set good boundaries and take self-care into consideration when requests are made of us. Some of you know through my story, but I'm a recovering alcoholic, and this is a time where there's a lot of alcohol around. And I still, after all this time of being sober, have to put boundaries in place to keep myself sober and not slipping. You know, we can easily slip up if we're in the wrong place at the wrong time, in the wrong company. And just because, you know, just because we think we should do something, whether it's people pleasing, trying to fit in, is not a good reason often, and it can leave us, you know, worn out. So I'd say give yourself plenty of room in the schedule and value yourself enough to say no, and put yourself first. And I think another thing too is hold expectations of others loosely. This is something that really can help us avoid disappointment. And the aftermath of disappointment can send someone spiraling so quickly. So by having lower expectations, we're not going to feel as let down. Another thing too, you know, I've had a lot of clients lately who have been battling with unforgiveness. Now, especially coming up to Christmas, you know, this is a time when relationships are really key. You know, that's the biggest thing about Christmas for many people. And so when we have bitterness or unforgiveness, you know, towards a person, it just doesn't stay confined to that. It spills out into every area of our life. So I think this is a time, you know, when it would be great to try and engage in letting go of unforgiveness if that has been present, because when we hold on to unforgiveness, the only person that gets hurt is ourselves. Yeah. And often that can be at the root of people spiraling.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think thinking kind thoughts of others, out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and thinking kind thoughts and positive thoughts is proven to have a really positive effect on our mental health. And then the last thing I think is engage in the 5 senses in a positive way. So not drinking till you're plastered or anything, but engage in the 5 senses as much as you can in a positive and self-controlled way. Great. And living on the Sunshine Coast, that's and everywhere, wherever you're listening from, as well as my normal self-care strategy. I just thought they were some things I came up with that could be helpful.
Great, thanks very much. That's great, Kerrie. And I want to jump into that issue around addiction back with Anastasia, because Anastasia, it seems to me that from my experience in talking to different people, that Christmas time is a time where people's addictions become a problem in particular. And I've seen people, for example, with drinking problems, do some absolutely crazy things around the Christmas period and get themselves into trouble. And I'm thinking of one person in particular where they completely disintegrated because of their addiction. Do you see that trend yourself, I guess, around this period, that addiction becomes an even bigger problem now?
Yeah, absolutely. For many individuals, the sort of Christmas period is one where we're out of our usual routine. We're around people who maybe we don't often spend a lot of time with. So there's a lot of change to our usual day-to-day structure. And as a result, there may be a more significant risk of either a lapse or a relapse if someone is sort of within recovery. What I would suggest is my suggestions for someone experiencing addiction or within addiction recovery and for someone experiencing PTSD and trauma symptoms would be much the same. And that is, know your triggers and know your tolerance. So we know that for people who've experienced some sort of trauma or PTSD, very often our window of tolerance is reduced. So every single person has a window of tolerance. And unfortunately, sometimes trauma can reduce that window of tolerance for us. And what we might find is that a particular trigger might lead someone to jump outside their window of tolerance. And this is the experience of feeling overwhelmed, panic, distressed. Or we can jump the other way where we experience a sort of detachment, numbness, dissociation. So know kind of what your tolerance is and what triggers lead you to jump outside of that, whether that might be to have a risk of potentially excess consumption of alcohol or relapse if you're in recovery for addiction, or whether they be PTSD trauma type triggers as well. I often recommend to my clients that they write out a list of what all my triggers are. And those can be external triggers, people, places, things, smells, sounds, etc. Or they might be internal triggers. So a physical or emotional sensation that reminds me of some trauma that I've experienced. So it may not actually be attached to a person or a place. Write out what those might be for you and a plan and a strategy that you may have in place for if you do have to face those people, places, etc. Or if those certain emotions do come up for you. I think preparedness over this sort of festive period is really important to help people cope as best as they can.
Great advice. Thanks, Anastasia. Renee, I'm going to go to you because I know that given what you've told us about yourself, you would have had some difficult Christmases in the past, I guess, or seen people in the work that you do, through loneliness and a range of other issues. What are some of the key issues from your perspective?
So I've been writing notes as everyone's been talking because they're all very similar. So that's the mark of a good webinar, which is great. It's almost like we prepared it. So I think the really importantly, and I'm going to sort of go backwards. So Anastasia talked about, you know, knowing your triggers. And for me, the way I understand that and the work that I've done is about what are my healthy coping mechanisms. So, you know, quite often we go to things like alcohol. It's easy to get. It's right there in front of us, particularly at this time of year, because we might not be feeling okay. So for me, I feel that tightness in my throat straight up. And if I'm feeling it, that's where the anxiety for me lives. The minute I start feeling that, I want it to go away. I want it to go away. I want it to go away. Maybe I should have a glass of wine. And then I go, no, because that's not the healthy way to manage this. And actually, similar to Anastasia, when she's saying document your triggers, document what else you can do to help you manage that feeling. You know, if it's not hurricaning outside, I'm in Canberra just like Alex, you know, maybe go for a run, which is what I tend to do. I try to exhaust it out of myself, because for me, it feels like this build-up of energy that has to get out. I think, Kerrie, you're a much better human than me. I'm half Italian. I need to take some forgiveness lessons off you. We don't, well, my family certainly doesn't do well with that. But relationships is really important. And I think for me, while, you know, I'm not great at forgiveness, and I struggle with it. I do struggle. And as much as there's people on my list, I want to get off my list and I want to forgive. It's difficult. Grant, don't worry, it's not a bad list. But I think for me, how I manage that is it's all about perspective, and it's talking. And the biggest gift that I've been given in the last few years is when the kids went to school and they were given a language to talk about their emotions. So, you know, I'm feeling a particular colour, and for me that works. You know, it's a way that I can communicate with my children and my husband really quickly about how I'm feeling, and they kind of then go, oh, okay, she's not okay. So, and having, if you have a good relationship with a friend, a loved one, you know, even a counsellor, if you've got one, someone that can help you get that perspective, because there might be an issue that you're dealing with at this time with a particular relationship, and for you it feels really big. It's important that that person validates how that feels, but it's important that they also be effective on the bigger picture there, and help you get some distance from it. And I think similar to Grant, you know, rest and move. Just rest and move, and it doesn't matter what that movement is, and also prioritizing your rest. It's really exhausting to have anxiety, to have PTSD, and to function like a human being, and just honor that. If you feel tired, go and have a rest. It's okay. And then again, just circling back to Kerrie, it's all about boundaries. You know, say no. And saying no can be really scary the first 1 or 2 times that you do it, but the more you do it, the more empowering it feels, because you're actually looking after yourself. And saying no, or, you know, choosing to walk away, or choosing not to go because you don't feel okay, and communicating that is completely okay. And when you do it, you'll find that people are actually quite receptive to that.
Yeah, great advice. I just reiterate again to our audiences that these are things that work for us, or work for, but they may not work for you. For example, in my own case, PTSD sufferer myself, it's really around anxiety. And when I'm getting very anxious, I was given some tools by my psychologist on what to do and how to associate with better things. And one of the things that he gave me was, when you're feeling down about yourself, is to create a positive story about yourself. It doesn't have to be long. It can be, you know, nothing more than 4 or 5 lines about who you are as a person. What are the positive aspects about you and your life? And when you get a little bit down, recite that positive story about yourself to yourself. And it's remarkable how much better it made me feel when I actually poo-pooed it at first when he gave it to me, but then I used it and it actually worked, and I continue to do that. But I guess the point I'm saying is, have a discussion with your mental health specialist. That's really important. Everyone's got a different way of coping with things, and what one technique may not work for you, but another one might. So that's the discussion you should be having. So thank you. There was some really good tips in there about that, and I'm in particular, I think that I love that idea about exercise as well. I mean, it's a good time to. You've got free time. You're not at work. You've beautiful sunny weather, hopefully. And go out and enjoy the sun, enjoy, smelling that flower or going down to the local park. It's very therapeutic. Okay, I'm going to raise the next issue is from a friend of mine, and he's asked me to, without giving too many details about him, he's ex-ADF, had a number of issues around PTSD, mental health, seemed to have got through them, but they did cause a bit of an issue within his own family, and they're now separated. This is his first Christmas away from his former wife and his children. So he sort of said to me that, looking at the topic of today's discussion, that it wasn't going to be a great Christmas for him, and he's concerned about lapsing back into old habits around his mental health. And obviously that emotional connect there with his children is not going to be there this year as well, which is going to be very hard for him. What advice or what are some of the avenues for him to take over the next couple of weeks? And anyone who wants to jump in first, please do so.
I'm happy to go.
Yeah.
As a child from a broken home myself, I would, I probably don't need to remind him of this, but I will. Just remember your kids. Remember that they love you. Remember that they're too hurting at this time, and that they don't want to be caught in the middle of whatever's going on. And importantly, it sounds like he's got a really good friend in you, Alex. So talk about when it's not okay. Reach out on the difficult day itself, because someone will be there to catch you on the other side. Yeah,
that's good advice. Any other advice there for him?
I'd say maybe if he can put something in place where that he knows he's got someone to spend the day with. I mean, if he feels like he doesn't want to join another family, often at different clubs or restaurants, they have meals, or different organisations put meals on for people that are going to be on their own. And I think that's the biggest thing, is not being on his own at Christmas time, just having some connection with someone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess from my perspective as his friend, my biggest concern for him is lapsing into his previous condition with his mental health. Anastasia, from your perspective, is there anything that he can do from that regard, to prevent him from going down these shallow holes that he'd gone down previously?
I think there's two trains of thought that are coming to mind for me. One is going down the pathway of coping and doing, if we are vulnerable and at risk, doing whatever we need to do to successfully get through a difficult period, even if that means using some really kind of short-term strategies, things that are not long-term solutions for our mental health, but are going to get us through the day or the week or whatever it is. The other train of thought I'm having is for some people, for most of us, emotions serve a particular function, and if someone is experiencing grief and loss during this holiday period, that's a really sort of valid feeling, and there's something to be said for actually feeling that and feeling the grief and the loss rather than avoiding that particular emotional experience. So depending on the person and their situation, it might be, I just need to get through and do whatever it is to sort of cope as best as I can and get to January and New Year. And for other people, it may actually be about leaning into the difficulty and experiencing that, grieving some of it as a way to be able to move through that, the pain of that.
Great advice. Grant, finally from you, I know you probably would have experienced some bad Christmases yourself. So any advice that you would like to give as a final thought?
No, absolutely correct. And having been through the same thing many years ago that your friend went through, and again, this has no science behind it. I don't know how I came up with the idea, but what I knew is if I did nothing, I would, well, I was suffering then, but I didn't know it. I would relapse mostly into alcohol. So I knew that I had to occupy myself. So I don't know what his personal circumstances are, but two things that I did particularly over that Christmas period was I thought, well, I'll keep busy. So I renovated the bedroom where I was living at the time. And what that did is it gave me purpose. It gave me a reason to get up. It gave me a reason to do things. And it also just took away that emptiness of being alone and being by yourself. So, you know, you've got to do the preparation because things aren't open around Christmas, etc. But secondly, what I did, and it goes to what Kerrie mentioned, I actually went and volunteered. So I went to one of those areas and served food and helped people, because what that made me do is it brought into perspective, you know, where I was at that time. And I always find it quite cathartic when I look at others and say, you know what, yeah, sure, I'm in the middle of a shit sandwich, but you know what, there are people that are worse than me. And that just, you know, it's that self-reflecting and that self-talking. And what I found that did is it stopped that massive vacuum of being alone and retreating into your internal thoughts and potentially get spiraling down a pathway that you don't want to go.
Yeah, excellent advice. And just to add to that, one of our board members, Simone Reed, has just written, and I think it's very, very good advice, that find friends that he or you can trust to be open and honest with, and not just vent to anyone. Feel the emotion of possible loss and grief. Setting in the emotion is really important to feel and understand. So that's great advice from Simone as well. So
Alex,
thank you,
can I add to that? I
Yeah.
think, and just to add to what everyone else has said, this is a short period of time.
Yeah.
So, and it's that advice we give to, as people that have been new mothers here all the time, this too will pass. And it's, you know, finding the way, as Anastasia and Grant and Kerrie have said, about how to journey through this moment right now.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you, everyone. My next topic is around goal setting. And so when, for those who've read my book, 2016 for me was the worst year of my life. I somehow managed to get through it with the help of friends such as RENEE and other people. But when I got to Christmas 2016 and New Year 2016, I sat down to talk about, you know, I've just gone through this really traumatic period in my life, and it was, you know, got through it okay. But I wanted to ensure that in the next 12 months that I wasn't going to, you know, lapse back into that previous situation. So I started to talk about goal setting, but I got a little bit confused about what my goals would be and how to go about it. And I know this is a question that a lot of people ask me independently. When you've got a mental health issue and you don't know what the future is going to bring, how do you set your goals? What do you do? So I'd be interested in any thoughts around that. And again, I'll open up to the panel who wants to go first. Anastasia.
Yeah, I really like this question. There's a type of therapy that we use called acceptance and commitment therapy. And one of the elements of the therapy is the identification of values and using values to be able to set goals. If we set goals for us that aren't sort of necessarily rooted within our values, they potentially end up being meaningless or not particularly meaningful and hard to stick to. So if we can actually, before we set goals, identify what are the things that are most important to us and most valuable to us in life and set goals in accordance with those, the research shows that we have greater life satisfaction. We might not necessarily be happy moment to moment, but our overall sense of satisfaction in our life is improved. Values are not necessarily things that we can ever really quite tick off and say, okay, you know, if I have the value of creativity, for example, I can't ever really go, okay, I've done that creativity thing, now on to the next one. It sort of stays with me through my life. So if before people set goals, they can reflect on what those values are for them, I think they're going to be in a better place to be able to set more meaningful goals that they can then sort of hopefully stick to in the long run.
Fantastic. That's a great answer. Thank you very much, Anastasia. I'm going to go to the next question because I'm unconscious of time. And I think this is a very important question for all of you to consider. It's from an anonymous attendee. They've asked, how do you deal with the need for connection, but your PTSD makes it too scary to deal with people? I think I can really resonate with this question because I went through a little bit this myself. Kerrie, do you want to start off maybe?
Yeah, I think that's where the online community is fantastic. You know, I know, for instance, when the pandemic hit and we couldn't get out, there was online AA and NA meetings. And that was fantastic because you don't have to have your camera on and you can just even listen. Just even listening with your camera off, you feel like you're part of something. So you're still connecting, but you're not having to face people. So I think that that's, you know, it's hard to, I wouldn't say to someone, go and push yourself and you do a bit of exposure therapy and expose yourself, you know, if you're in a heightened state. Sometimes that can be good to push yourself a little bit, but depending on what state the person's in, I think just trying to be part of something online, whether it's visiting an app or visiting a support group or something like that. Okay,
thank you, Kerrie. Grant, I'm sorry I interrupted you there.
No, that's fine. Not too dissimilar to what Kerrie's saying. I know there's nothing wrong with ghosting. I mean, ghosting, when we talk about online environment, always conjures up these, you know, nefarious type of people, but there's nothing wrong with ghosting. And that's what Kerrie was saying, is just sitting in the background anonymously, watching and listening. Because again, that can be really, really useful and cathartic, just to know that what you're going through at the time, many others are as well. You're not that person sitting there by yourself alone, as I think many of us have done in the past. But also too, what I've seen over the recent period is a greater use of texting, and especially, you know, I've used it in the past when people have sort of come forward anonymously and wanted to sort of talk about issues, but didn't want to talk personally or over a phone or what have you. And texting can also help because it's, you know, it's non-emotive. You're not engaging with people. You could still, sorry, in a physical sense, but if you're that way inclined that you really just don't want to be having to, you know, look at someone, hear someone, you take away all those elements, and it's really just a way of starting the conversation, which hopefully eventually will lead you to the next process of say, doing what Kerrie's doing. So you use all those other technology capabilities that are about to be able to do that, to find what suits you for the time and the purpose where you are at that time, you know, to help you move on.
Excellent. No, that's great advice, Grant. Renee, did you want to add anything to that as well?
Yeah, just, you know, as the others have mentioned, you know, there's text forms which are very much less intrusive. You don't feel quite as exposed or as vulnerable. And similar to that, there's online chat forums. So, you know, depending on the community that you're fitting into, there's various chat forums that exist. You know, for example, I know of one in the carer space, and, you know, that's there to talk about, you know, hard things. And you're all set up actually anonymously on that. So no one really knows your identity. I think there's a quote, and I'm going to get it wrong. I'm assuming Anastasia will know what it is, but there's a quote, and I'm assuming Kerrie would too. It says, "It doesn't matter who I think I am, it matters who you think matters who you think I am." Well, I think you think I am. Anyway, I've said it all backwards, but suffice to say, what I'm trying to say is that for me personally, that was really at the root of a lot of this, that I would find myself feeling vulnerable in a group full of people I didn't know, because I thought everyone else thought I was an idiot. And I was actually the only one experiencing that. I was doing that to myself. So I go back to, you know, just that what I mentioned at the start around perspective. And if you've got, you know, a friend or a loved one that you can talk to about that perspective and try to really understand what's at the root of that. And you know, finding other ways too online is a great tool.
Yeah, and look, I can really resonate with that question because, as I said, during my period, and I was a senior leader in the public service at the time, I found it difficult, difficult for that year, dealing with other senior public servants who probably knew what I'd gone through. And it's about that reinforcing yourself. And I go back to what I said before about that narrative about yourself. It's very important to, when you're suffering, in my opinion, when you're suffering a mental illness, to be good to yourself, to be kind to yourself, and to reinforce really the good things about you, what makes you as a person. So again, it's a very good question, and I hope that some of the answers have helped that particular person. So thank you for the question.
Alex, can I add one quick thing?
Yeah, sure.
Oh, sorry, Grant.
No, you go.
Yeah, even reading a book, when I went through a really hard time and I didn't know anybody that had experienced what I had, I started to find books of people that had gone through similar experiences and come out the other side.
Yeah.
And
that's important. Yeah.
Such a wonderful sense of connection, and that I wasn't alone, even though the person couldn't talk back. It's knowing that there's hope for your situation and that you're not alone.
I think accessing lived experience is fantastic. I agree.
There's a book on everything. There is a book on everything. And you could probably Google the most obscure thing that you think you're the only person in the world that's going through it, and you'll find a story.
Yeah.
Sorry, Grant. Just quickly to add to that, what concerns me, there's plenty of, there's plenty of tools and resources out there for people that are suffering. But I know from my experience, in particular with my wife, when she knew that there was something wrong with me, she struggled. She struggled to find the right people to talk to, because I'd sworn her to secrecy. So she had to try and do it without me being aware, having to manage my moods and my swings and all the things, and wasn't able to easily find a forum where she could connect with other partners, wives, husbands who are going through the same thing. And I think that's sort of over this period, it's critical, because there will be families out there that are going to be in that exact position. And that's what disturbs me more than anything else. It goes to Renee's initial point about, her reasons why she came to Fearless.
Yep, exactly. No, very good advice. Thank you. Look, that hour went really, really quickly. So we've come to the end of our presentation. It's amazing. I thought we had another 15 minutes, but it's almost 6:30. Before I'm going to ask you each a very quick question, which is, what's your one Christmas message to give to people this year? Or what is one unique thing that you do within your own families to celebrate Christmas? Before I do that, though, I just want to reiterate, if you do have an issue, to consult your mental health specialist or doctor. If over the Christmas period you do feel down, there are obviously people that can help you with, like Beyond Blue and Lifeline. If you want to find those numbers, if you go to our website, fearless.org.au, there's a list of numbers there that you can utilise. Please seek help if you are suffering or you are having a bad period, because there are people who understand your situation that'd be able to give you some initial good advice. So please do that and enjoy your Christmas. But I'm going to go to each of the panelists to ask them, as I said, you can answer either question. What's something unique in your family, or what's your final message to people in this coming festive period? So Anastasia, I'll start with you.
Yes, my takeaway message for anyone thinking they might be struggling over the Christmas period is plan ahead. Have a solid plan of what things might be triggering for you, what strategies you can use to cope, people that you can reach out to, whether it's family, friends, professional services, phone lines, etc. Plan ahead, and then once you have that plan in place, back yourself to be able to use it. Have that self-belief and self-confidence to actually be able to carry out the plan, and trust that you know you best and you'll get yourself through this.
Great advice. Thank you, Anastasia. Kerrie, I'm going to go to you next.
Be with whoever you can that you love, and find whatever you can that brings you joy. And also, it's just another day, a Christmas day. And just remember, and don't be sold the lie that what you're going through now will be your reality forever. It won't. It will pass, and always hold on to hope.
That's the key word, hope. I agree with you very much there, Kerrie. Thank you. Renee, what's your take?
I'm going to plug an online community for veteran spouses for exactly that reason, Grant. No offence. to you or to the veterans that women like me love, and men, but sometimes you can be really difficult to live with. So we've created an online community for those people, which is a safe space in order to have those discussions. And if anyone wants to know any more about that, just let Alex know and I can link you up. In terms of a takeaway, I'm just going to roll back to that core message about perspective and a reminder to ourselves individually, as Kerrie mentioned, you know, this will pass, but also gaining perspective on our own lives and the issues that we're currently dealing with. The way we do that practically in our family is we take a walk through the Canberra city and we, with the kids, hand out Christmas cards, candy canes and a little treat to the homeless people that we find, because we want them to know that there are people thinking of them, because they are, I guess, that real physical manifestation of what it means to be vulnerable and alone.
Fantastic. Thanks, Renee. And finally, Grant.
Very simply, be kind to yourself. Don't suffer in silence. Don't suffer alone. We've all experienced it. We've all done it. You know, there are people out there that can help. And what we do is we donate. We go and get buy animal food and take it down to the local animal shelter where they're usually overburdened with animals at this time of year, and donate food for the animals that are in shelters.
Excellent. And my takeout message is just be true to yourself. Don't let the doubters get in your way. Always believe in the power of yourself and what you can achieve. And I wish everyone a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I hope it's a safe one for everyone. As I said, if you are suffering from depression or other mental health issues, please talk to someone. Please utilise those numbers. As I said before, it's very important that you do that at this time of the year. I'd like to thank each and every one of our 4 amazing ambassadors here today, Renee, Anastasia, Grant and Kerrie. Thank you very much for your wisdom. We at Fearless really look forward to working with the 4 of you next year. It'll be a big year for Fearless next year. We have our next national conversation most likely in October, but wait for that announcement early next year because there will be some things we still need to organise ahead of that. But at this stage, it's likely to be in Wollongong in October of next year, but there will also be an opportunity for people to join online as well. So we look forward to that. On behalf of everyone at Fearless, I would like to thank Tracy Duncan for her amazing support that she's provided Fearless with these webinars over the last year. Our webinars are our lifeblood into our support base. This is the way that we can spread our message and get people talking about PTSD, to try to demystify PTSD and get rid of some of the difficulties that people have in understanding how PTSD impacts on people. So thank you again, Tracy. I'd like to thank the board of Fearless with Chris Barry, our chairperson, all the board members who have contributed to Fearless over the last 12 months. Looking forward again to a big year. And with that, I just again want to wish everyone a happy Christmas, a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. And thanks to our brilliant team one more time. So all the best and see you all in 2023. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thanks, Ed. Bye-bye.
Yes.